Hello and welcome to this video course on how to generate micro-targeted leads with a survey funnel. This is video number 1, which is the introduction and getting started. Now, first things first, before we get started, I want to make sure that you are in the right mindset. The goal here is to get leads, obviously, but before you can do any of that, I really want you to pause for just a minute and put your own thoughts aside. Now, what do I mean by that? Instead, I want you to put yourself in your prospect's shoes. They all have very different reasons from buying from you. So your goal at the end of the day is to try to understand what they are. Can you do that? So go ahead and pause right now and get into that mindset. Now what I want to do is give you a quick overview of what's inside this video course. Video number 1 is the introduction, obviously. Video number 2 is listening versus speaking. So in this video, we're going to talk about a specific sales strategy that you're going to be using in this survey funnel and how it's going to be impactful in helping you get the right data so that you can convert more sales. Video number 3, we're going to talk about your end goal. Video number 4, we're going to talk about your product and service. Video number 5, we're going to talk about the buyer that fits, or in other words, trying to figure out the buyer that will fit your end goal, that will want your product and service. Video number 6, we'll talk about the typical day of a buyer. Now, the reason why we need to understand this is to get in a better frame of mind of what your buyer is thinking. The more you can do with that, the more that you'll be able to convert them. And of course, video number 7, we're going to talk about the survey form, and we're going to map it all out in video number 8. And of course, there is a video number 9, and we'll basically take everything that you've learned, everything we mapped out in the mind map in video number 8, and we'll begin to implement what we discuss so that you can begin to segment your buyers so that you will ultimately speak to them based upon their own needs. Now, in terms of getting started, you don't really need a whole lot. You just need to have your product and service. You need to have a basic understanding of your customers. If you don't really understand them to the T and all the way to down to the detail, we're going to get at that in this course. You're going to need to have access to a form builder, and we will suggest 2 form builders that we have found very useful. And of course, you'll need an email autoresponder system. And last but not least, you will need a mind map flowchart system or a piece of paper. We recommend lucidchart.com. You can use a piece of paper, but you'll see why in just a minute that using a piece of paper is not the most ideal situation, especially when you begin to map things out and you need to move things around. So with that said, let's move on to video number 2. Hello and welcome back. This is video number 2. We're going to talk about listening versus speaking. Now, if you study the most successful salespeople, you will learn that there is an art involved. And if you often study, for example, influential leaders who move people and have people following them, there's an art involved as well. So if you think about leaders, there's several different types of leaders, which was what we're talking about here. One leader is a type of leader who uses their authority to move people around. They're very bossy. But then you have the other type of leader who gains trust from people, and people are willing to move because they trust that leader, and they're using their influence rather than their authority. So that's the type of leader that we're talking about here. If you study counselors and their ability to help people pinpoint roadblocks and get them to the point of healing fast, you will also see this art in action. It's the art of listening, not speaking, but listening. Now, this is often very tough because in our society that is constantly talking, we're used to people speaking, and we're used to telling people why do they need this or why they need that or whatever. Especially if your personality type is extroverted. Now, if you're an introvert, you often have somewhat of an advantage here because you're constantly listening internally and you're waiting before you're speaking. So you're a little bit of ahead of the curve here. So what I'm trying to get at here is that in terms of the survey funnel, we will be listening. So regardless, whatever your personality type, doesn't matter. Regardless, the point is there's a time to listen and there's a time to speak. When it comes to survey funnels, listening is crucial, and you'll see in just a minute why that is the case. When you first gather the data, you're trying to understand the needs of your prospect. So you need to clearly pinpoint what makes them buy. Now, if you were in speaking mode, you would assume people had specific needs, and based on those assumptions, you would create your funnel. Now, bear in mind that that is a dangerous situation to be in, because a lot of times we really don't know what our prospects and our buyers are really thinking. And a lot of times they don't even know either. But it's a matter of asking them questions, getting the right data, and then essentially figuring out based on that data what they want. So hopefully that makes sense, listening versus speaking. So if you think about a counselor, a lot of times they'll sit in a room and they'll listen to what you have to say. Now, they'll ask the right questions, but they will get you to answer. And a lot of times, a lot of people will say, why am I paying for a counselor? Why am I paying to go to somebody for them just to listen? Well, the reality is that it's not just that. They are asking the correct questions, which in this case, as a survey funnel, you'll be asking the right questions. And we'll give you some example of questions that you can ask. And what that does is it helps the person figure out essentially why they need something, what is the source of their pain, what is essentially that looks like. And that's what we're trying to do in this case. So you could think of it as a survey funnel, you could think of it as essentially a counseling funnel, but that's the goal. Is at the end of the day, if you help somebody figure out what is blocking them, why they do what they do, they will be forever grateful to you, and they'll eventually buy your products, if that makes sense. So if you sit down with 3 or more prospects, so let's say you're having a counseling session and you sit with 3 of them one-on-one and you ask them the same questions, you will often find that there are very different reasons why they are interested in your product. And in just a minute, I'm going to use some examples and to reveal to you how that works. So through this discovery process, you're going to be learning things that you've never heard before, things that you assumed were true, but it was totally the opposite. Now, oftentimes you'd even have ideas, like I said, assumptions, which are entirely wrong. Assumptions are very, very dangerous because that can get you into thinking that people like something, that you know better. And just because you know the product and service really well, we found over the years that most people that have products and services don't even realize what the main reason why people buy. They think they know, even a lot of salespeople, they think they know, but they don't. That's why jumping ahead and assuming why people buy is ineffective. And that is why we call that speaking before listening. So you're jumping ahead, you're speaking for the person, assuming that you know what's in their mind, instead of sitting down and listening. So I wanted you to understand that concept because it's a very opposite thinking in our society. So hence listening before speaking is crucial in this case. Now, to put things into perspective, imagine if you stick to your assumptions, you speak without listening first, you'll create a whole funnel, you'll spend months, 2 months, 3 months setting up that funnel, mind mapping it out, and then you wonder, why is no one buying? It's frustrating, right? You spend all that time and then you realize that nobody is buying. So this is a typical mistake, and we don't want you to make an ineffective funnel either. So how does this look in practical terms? Well, you could sit down with 3 or more prospects and ask them these questions that we're about to share with you in the future videos. So we're not going to talk about all the questions in this video. We're just going to talk about them in the future videos. Or you can simply create a survey for the purpose of gathering data and market research. So you initially create the survey, you gather the data, and based on that, then you create another survey or quiz or whatever to get them through your funnel. So it's a two-part process. So keep in mind that this is not to be confused, like I said, with the survey that you're going to be using later in the actual funnel to essentially qualify the prospect to become a lead. That's not what we're going to talk about. We're talking about right now gathering the right data, either through surveys or through sitting down on a one-on-one, essentially counseling session with your prospect. So it is first and foremost to listen and get the right data. Now, in order to create the survey form, there are plenty of survey web applications out there for you to use. And some of those include surveymonkey.com and wufoo.com. And we'll tell you why we chose these later down the road. There's a reason why we're not utilizing all the web survey forms out there, and that's because we're going to be using conditional rules. Now, doesn't make sense right now. It's okay. We're going to talk about that later down the road. All right. So let's move on to video number 3. Hello, welcome back. This is video number 3, and we're going to talk about your end goal, or in other words, your objective. So how your funnel will look like really depends on this piece of the puzzle, because if you're trying to generate leads or you're trying to generate sales, that really can differentiate. So in other words, if you don't know your objective, then your funnel really won't convert well. Now, in terms of this survey strategy, it really is determined by what you're trying to achieve. You can start by answering this question: are you trying to sell a product or a service? Or are you merely trying to generate leads? So perhaps you want to do your market research right so that you can understand the multiple reasons why somebody would use your product and your service. Now, you can ask people to take a survey and choose from a list of reasons. You can even tailor the autoresponder series or even sales video that you send them to, and send them to a specific video that will cater to them. So this will make more sense in just a minute if it is a little bit confusing. So this is so crucial because this empowers you to literally speak to a person's needs, and by doing so, you will get higher conversions. So in other words, what I'm talking about here is, let's say you take initial survey and you find out there are 3 main reasons why somebody buys your product and service. So you take those 3 main reasons, you create a different survey or a quiz, whatever, and you have them go through them. And if they choose one of those 3 reasons, then you send them to a different location. Does that make sense? So let's say, for example, they have choices 1, 2, and 3. If they choose number 1, they get sent to a different email autoresponder and a different video sales letter that talks about that specific need. And let's say, for example, that they choose number 3, then they get sent to a totally different sales letter or sales video and a different email autoresponder series that is tailored to that specific need. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, but we're going to give you practical examples so that it definitely makes more sense. So for example, if you were to sell a security product, you could be selling to a father, a single woman, or an elderly couple. Now, if you approach the situation generically, you would usually sell it as a security product to promote one's family. Now, as this example is going to show you why, if you're going to speak to all 3 of those types of people the same way, it's actually going to not be as impactful. So believe it or not, these 3 types of people would have completely different needs. For example, the father is going to be concerned about his family, whereas the single woman, she doesn't really have a family, it's just her. She might have some pets or dogs or cats or bunnies or whatever, but the single woman may be concerned about her safety and her pet's safety. Then you have the elderly couple who have totally different needs as well. Now, by speaking to them as if they were individuals, thoughtfully considering that each of them have very specific needs, your conversion rate will skyrocket, right? Because if you're talking to the father, you're saying, hey, if you're a father, blah, 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 or hey, if you're a single woman, or hey, if you're an elderly couple, they're going to resonate with that, right? So are you trying to qualify a lead before they are approved into your service. Because when it comes to offering a service, you want to figure out if the prospect is the best fit for you and vice versa. That's why I ask you, are you trying to sell a product or a service? Because they can be slightly different, as you'll see in just a minute. So having run services before, it becomes much of a headache if you attract the wrong customer base. So that's why in certain respects, you need to qualify them based on your data. So the only way that you can avoid that is by understanding different customers and understanding how different questions can essentially bring in good clients and disqualify the bad clients. So at the end of the day, you don't want to take every single client, especially for if you offer a service, right? You want to find the client that is going to see your value, they're going to pay the money, and they're going to leave you alone because they know that you're the expert, versus the other client who might pay you the same amount of money, but they're going to be on your doorstep every single day asking you to change this, to change that. And it's just going to eat up so much time that you won't be able to spend time with your other clients. So that's why you don't want to take everybody, right? So the reason being is some clients are just nightmare situations. We've had clients before where we offer services and what should have taken a week ended up taking a whole 4 months. And then we have other clients, on the other hand, that it should have taken a month and it was really done within a few weeks and the client was super happy. So hindsight 2020, you look at it and you think, I would rather have the second client. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what your objective will look like. If you can jot down what would look like for you before you even move on to the next video, that will actually help you devise a great strategy. So let's move on to video number 4. Hello and welcome to video number 4. We're going to talk about your product and your service. So now that you understand your objective, it's time to bring things into the light and understand your buyer and how it relates to the product in a much better way. So it's quite obvious that you should know what you're selling. But I want you to complete an exercise and I'll give you some examples to follow along. So what I want you to do right now is to take out a pen and paper and start writing things down. If you don't like pen and paper, you can also pull out your iPhone or your smartphone as well. Now, ideally, it'd be better if you sit down with a prospect and do this. And if you can't, try to get them on the phone and even pay them money. Say, hey, I'll pay you X amount of money just to sit down with you and talk with you. And list out 4 different needs or pain points that your product and service solves. In other words, what could your potential buyer lose by not buying your product and service? Let's take, for example, the security product from earlier. So if we write down the 4 different needs or pain points that a security product in general would solve, we would know number 1, it would solve that anxiety and that fear and that concern about the family at night. Concern about pets when they're away. Concern about family when they are on a trip or anyone that's away. Concerned about the house when they are away. So those are just 4 of the pain points that everybody most likely feels. Now, some people won't have pets, some people won't have children. So that's why we try to cover as much as possible. Now, bear in mind that these 4 are merely scratching the surface. I could go on and list 10 or even 20 if we wanted to. And I advise you, if you can list more, then great. But the goal of this exercise is to merely get your brain jogging so that we're going to keep it with a lower number. But if you can do more, great, do more. Now, what I want you to ask yourself is this question. How much time would they lose, and they being your customers, if they didn't have what you were selling? Well, if they didn't have a security product and they were concerned with all these items, you already know that they have fear, they have anxiety, that's probably keeping them up at night. They would probably have to keep checking the house. They would have to ask their neighbors to keep an eye out on it. They would lose sleep at night because of that anxiety, that worry of what could potentially happen. Now, obviously, it would change if we take a look at the father, the single woman, and the elderly couple. Based on those three, those could change in a variety of ways. So the father, if he's away on a trip, obviously he's going to be concerned about his family at home. If the single woman's away and she has a pet, she's obviously going to be concerned about the pet, right? So it can be different still in different ways. And overall, like I said, anxiety can cause stress and health issues. Now, don't worry about what buyer fits these concerns or pain points just yet. We're going to do that in the next video. What I'm trying to do here is merely get your brain jogging so that you can start thinking about these pain points and these loss of time and loss of something. So with that said, if you have not jotted down the pain points and the concerns, plus the time lost that your buyers would face without getting your product and service, go ahead and do that right now. Feel free to pause this video and then unpause it when you are done. It's not going to take a lot of your time. So let's move on to video number 5, and we're going to dig deeper. We're going to elaborate further and figure out which buyer fits what and how you can go about doing that. Okay, so welcome back. This is video number 5, and we're going to talk about the buyer that fits these concerns and these pain points. So based on the prior video, we should have an idea about the pain points and the loss of time. Now what we need to do is we need to figure out, what do they look like? What age are they? And what demographics are they? Now, with a security product, you could be all over the place, but what you're not trying to do is figure out what your buyer is, but who is your hungriest buyer. So when you really think about who is losing the most sleep at night, that is most likely your hungriest buyer. If you've got somebody who's like, yeah, I could use a security product, that would be something good, but they're not necessarily losing sleep, that might not be the buyer that you want to target. Because remember, you can't target everyone. You could have 10 different funnels going to different email autoresponder series and different video sales letters, but that's not your goal. You're trying to find the hungriest buyer, essentially. So we're going to do a few things that will help us figure that out. So let's take a look at what we wrote earlier. So now what I want you to do is ask yourself, what do these buyers look like? We're going to dig deeper into this, and you're going to see, like the next video after that, we're going to try to figure out what their typical day looks like. So we're going to dig that deep. And the reason why is because that's going to help you convert more sales when you can relate to somebody and they feel like they're reading your sales letter or listening to your sales video and they feel like, wow, this person really understands me. They understand my needs. They understand why I'm up at night. Oh, I trust this person, I'm going to buy from them, versus they go to somebody else who's just trying to sell them and they don't really understand them. It's kind of like you walk into a store and somebody asks, hey, like, what do you need this for? Or let me give you a better example, a car dealership. Most people are very fearful about going to car dealerships. But when they get there and the car dealership does not act like the typical car dealership, and they're like, hey, what are you looking for? Okay, all right. And they leave you alone, but they're genuinely interested because they want you to find the right car, versus the other person is like, hey, I think this is great for you. You look kind of like the guy who wants the Ferrari or whatever, and you might not be the guy who wants the Ferrari or the lady who wants something else. So that's why we're thinking listen versus speak. So most of the car dealerships that are assuming, they are seeing as speaking before listening. But a lot of car dealerships are actually trying to change into listening first before speaking. So what I want you to try to write out is the detail of how you envision them in your mind. If you're a visual person, you can even draw them if you would like. So that will help you figure out who they look like. Now, of course, you may not know exactly how they look like, but this exercise is to merely help you better process what your potential buyer looks like. So you may not know exactly what race they are or what sex they are, if they're male or female or whatever, but kind of get an idea of their needs, essentially. So it's much better if you can even find somebody you know in your real life, because that will help paint a better picture. If you can do that, that will help you stick in your minds like, oh, okay, I need to talk to this person because they're interested in this product and service and they have specific needs. And that's why if you can do that, great. If you can't, then what you want to do is you want to try to find somebody who fits that and try to get on the phone with them and just talk with them. And you don't even have to speak. You just let them talk. So it's a counseling session. You have the right questions to ask them. All you have to do is talk to them. And most likely, if somebody is very passionate about a specific subject matter, they're going to talk and talk and talk for literally several hours. And guess what? They're going to walk away and they're going to feel like, wow, I was able to process through what is in my mind. But not only that, I'm getting paid for it. So if you sit down with somebody and you pay them whatever amount of money that you think is valuable, $10, $20, $30, $50, or $100, whatever you think is valuable for them, and get a genuine response from them, then that's going to help you down the road. Now, let's do a further analysis by doing some basic demographic research with a free Facebook ad tool. So obviously, in order to use this tool, you will need to have a Facebook account. But this is an amazing tool that will reveal some information that is the data that you need in the marketplace, such as who they are, what sex they are, where they're located, what they're earning, and all of that. Okay, so we're going to be using a tool called Facebook Audience Insights. Now, the URL I've noticed is a little different. Sometimes it's business.facebook.com and then sometimes it's facebook.com. So I can say the best way to get there is simply by logging into your Facebook account, looking for the Facebook Ads Manager, go there, and up at the top, if you click that button that says Ads Manager, you're going to see an option that says Business Settings, Ads Manager, Audience Insights, and Audiences. Now, if you're still not able to get there, you can also go to google.com and type in Facebook Audience Insights. And it really depends on where you're located, that URL can change. So you want to go to Audience Insights. This is basically a tool that Facebook gives you for free that you can use. And it allows you to see a micro data of people who are highly interested in specific topics, people who are highly interested in pages that you might be connected to, and all that. So the easiest way to use this tool is not using any of these first, but by entering the interest. So let's switch to something else, because I did a search earlier on home security and I wasn't getting a lot of traction. So let's do a search on home automation and see what we get. Now, what's interesting about this was I assumed that the people that would be interested in home automation would primarily be men. And while it's about close to 50-50, you can see that 56% of women are interested in home automation. Now, we don't know. Hypothetically, that could be because they're using their husband's accounts. We don't know. But this is enough data to tell us that there is a majority of women. So 56% women, 44% men. Now, the nice thing about this tool is it allows you to paint the picture in a better light. So let's say, for example, that we want to figure out, are these women single or are they mainly married? So you can see 21% is the highest here. We've got 25% for men for ages 25 to 34. So this age bracket here somehow seems to be more interested in home automation. Now, 35 to 44, for men, it's about the same. For women, it's about very similar, but it's 21%, 90%. But this bracket here, age 25 all the way to 54, they seem to be highly interested in home automation. Now, we can see that the older it gets, 55 to about 65, they're not as interested. In 18 to 24, they're not as interested. So that gives us an idea of who we can target, but we want to get an idea of what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what their lifestyle is, and begin to kind of paint a picture of who they look like. And that's why in a minute, as you can see here, my assumption that it was a men, but it was reality, it was mainly women. And that's interesting because that shows you that my assumption was incorrect. That's why assumptions are so dangerous, because imagine if you were built to build a whole sales funnel based on your assumptions and what you saw, because you were thinking, okay, I own this product and service, so I must know the demographics, but in reality, it's the opposite. So what's nice about Facebook Audience Insights is if you click on one of these, so we'll click on 25 to 34, and this is merely focusing on the women. So 500 to 600,000 monthly active people. We can scroll down and we can see that most of them are married. A lot of them are single, but most of them are married. A lot of them have college degrees. A lot of them are into healthcare and medical services, personal care and home services, education and libraries, legal services. So not necessarily technical, but they are very highly into healthcare. So we don't know exactly why until we actually go to the pages that they like and look at that. So we can see business and finance, that's sort of techie. But let's scroll back up and look at the page likes. These right here are the top categories that they are interested in for this age range of 25 to 34. So we can see exactly what they're interested in: clothing stores, jewelry, cosmetics, baby goods, IKEA. So it looks like they're interested in a lot of baby goods. So what we saw earlier was that a lot of them were married at this age, or maybe beginning their life of being married and having a family. So we can see the page likes. You can even go to these pages and see how they interact with each other. We can go to location to get an idea of where they're located. So we can see North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas. So a lot of these are actually the southeast, which is interesting. I don't know why they're interested in home automation, but they are. So that gives us an idea of geographically, maybe we can dig further, look into cultures. They look like Southern, so we don't really know why they're interested in home automation, but they are. If we click on activity, we can see how engaging they are. A lot of them comment, a lot of them likes. They don't do a lot of sharing, but they do click ads. A lot of them are using desktops or iPhones or Android. So they're using a lot of smartphones and they're using desktop computers. So that gives us an idea of who we're dealing with. If we go back to demographics, the nice thing about this is you can paint a picture for this particular demographic, but if you wanted to move on to, let's say, men ages 35 to 44, we click that with our mouse, and Facebook is going to give the data for that particular segment. So if we scroll down, we can see a lot of them are married. A lot of them have college degrees. There's IT, technical services, mathematics, engineering, veterans. So that's interesting because a lot of these men are having jobs that are highly technical. And that makes sense. They are into home automation because they're highly technical. So looking at the women, however, on the other hand, a lot of them are healthcare. So digging further into that and trying to figure that out would be beneficial to you. So maybe even finding somebody who's that age, who's into healthcare, maybe a nurse or something like that, and sit down and talk with them, and they're interested in home automation. That will give you a better idea of who you're dealing with. So like I said earlier, you're not trying to target everybody and all the buyers out there. You're trying to target a specific segment of people who are very, very interested and highly hungry in terms of a buyer. So that's how to use Facebook Audience Insights to gather even more data and more information about your buyer. What I want to do now is dig further and deeper into their typical day. Welcome back. This is video number 6. We're going to talk about the typical day. So in this video, you will look at the buyers that we previously looked at and gain insights into their typical day. Now, essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand what is going on in their minds. The more you can understand their typical day, what happens when they wake up, what happens at lunchtime, when they go to work, maybe they're taking care of their babies, maybe they're doing errands, and then they get home. What do they face during the day? In doing so, you're going to basically open up a realization of what their frustrations are, what their pain points are, what makes them happy, what makes them sad. And in order to do that, we need to better understand what their typical day looks like. Now, of course, a typical day for one person is going to be drastically different from another person. So the goal here is you don't necessarily have to get perfect. It's just to get a general view of a specific demographic, if that makes sense. So let's take a closer look and break things down. So I often find that the easiest way to find a typical day for a specific person, specific age, specific sex, a specific lifestyle is simply by going to google.com and typing in typical day for whatever you're looking for. So if we're looking for an elderly couple, we could say a typical day for an elderly couple. Sometimes you have right off the bat, people are talking about it. Or you can just simply, in this case, since it's elderly couples, we could simply go to the websites where elderly couples hang out and see if we can find somebody maybe in a forum who is actually talking about their typical day. So if we scroll down here, it says what retirees do all day, right? You could even type that in, what young married couples do all day, or what fathers of big families do all day. So let's scroll up here. So opening up that, this one is, how is the day-to-day life of an elderly couple in the Western Hemisphere? Or what is a day like in the life of a really old person like 70 plus? So Quora.com is a really good place to find questions and answers. So you can go to Quora.com and let's just load one of these up. So it says, what is a day like in a life of a really old person? So we scroll down, it says my dad is 92, he has outlived his wife who has died, blah, 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 blah. And what I recommend that you do is just read through this and try to get a better understanding of your audience. And not just read one or two or three, but try to read as many as you can, maybe from Quora.com. And then the next thing to do is go to actual forums and figure out what they are talking about. So that way you get it from the perspective of maybe their kids or somebody else's perspective, and then you get their perspective from themselves as well. So then you can kind of measure the two and compare the two and figure out what are similarities. So it says here, what do retirees do all day? It says they relax, they watch TV, they sleep, they do household chores, they eat and drink and work and shop and volunteer and so forth. Now, what I recommend that you do is you take a notepad and you just jot down what is actually happening. So when do they wake up? So when do they start their day? I want you to write it out hour by hour by hour if possible, and say, okay, maybe most of them wake up at 9 a.m. and then they greet the day and then they get ready by getting some breakfast, and then maybe they go read a newspaper, and then maybe some go do gardening or do something like a hobby or something. Write down the hour by hour, because believe it or not, that will actually help you understand what their frustrations are and how much time do they actually have during the day to take a survey and when and all that. So that's what I recommend that you do. Don't focus on this way too much. Just have fun, type in a typical day for blank, or what do blank do all day, and get an idea. Just jot it down and write it down. That will help you understand how to talk to them. You'll understand deeper their frustrations, what keeps them up at night, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what are they spending their money on, and all of that. So with that said, let's move on to the next video. Okay, so welcome back. This is video number 7. We're going to talk about the survey form. So what we're trying to figure out is how long your survey form should be. And in that thought process, it really depends on your buyer and their attention span. So I can't really say you have to ask them 5 questions or 10 questions or 20 questions. It really depends on your prospect and essentially their patience level. So in order to do that, you have to get an idea of their typical day. So that's why we did the exercise previously. So if you skip that, you're really not going to know how much time they have during their typical day. Now, if you go back and do that typical day exercise, it's going to reveal to you some things, and that will give you a better idea of, okay, their day is really, really busy. They're not going to sit down and take a 20 question survey, but they will definitely sit down and take a 5 or even 10 question survey. So, like I said, I can't give you an exact number that is going to be required for every single person. It really depends, and you can arrive at a better educated guess by doing that exercise. So, in other words, by understanding your buyer and how willing they are to go through your whole service, that is when you will know. So obviously, you don't want to make it too long, but you want to ask the right amount of questions. Now, in terms of what survey web application you should use, we recommended SurveyMonkey.com and Wufoo.com. And the reason why we don't recommend every single survey form builder or quiz builder or anything out there is simply because for this to really work, you're going to need to have an option that will allow you to redirect people to different locations based on the questions that they answer. So going back to the father, the single woman, and the elderly couple. So we have 3 different choices. If they choose that this is my age, we're retired, whatever, you're not going to want to send them to the exact same location, right? Otherwise, that defeats the whole purpose of a survey funnel and customizing that experience to them. That's why not every single form builder or quiz builder is going to work. Now, what these are called are conditional rules. If a person says, yes, I'm an elderly couple, then send them here. If they say that they are a father of a family, send them here. If then. So you need the conditional rules, and the form builder needs to be complex enough to offer those as options. So going back to the security example, if the father is taking the survey and checks that, yes, we want to redirect them to a specific location. And this will allow you to direct them to a different video sales letter or even a different email autoresponder system. So in turn, you can customize the experience that they have, your email series to that specific person and their needs. So hopefully this makes sense. If you're wondering how to implement this, don't worry. We're going to talk about that in the upcoming videos. What we definitely recommend Wufoo.com or SurveyMonkey.com. Wufoo.com, I believe it's a little bit cheaper. You can start out with the basics, but just make sure that the plan that you choose has those conditional rules. Now, if you want to start out with the cheapest plan first, and then as you discover those different buyers, then you can switch up. So whatever works for you, go ahead and do that now. So now that we've covered that, it's very, very crucial to map out your survey funnel. In other words, what will it look like? And that's what we're going to do in the next video. This is video number 8, and we're going to map things out via the mind map. Now, here comes the exciting part. So we pretty much went through a lot of information. We gathered a lot of data. And now in this video, we're going to map out your whole funnel. Now, it's great to visually map things out via a flowchart system or a mind mapping software, simply because when it comes time to implement everything without a mind map or a flowchart, it's guaranteed that you're going to get lost along the way. So in our experience, having successfully implemented hundreds of funnels, we can vet that a mind map helps to understand where you are in the process. Because a lot of times when the going gets tough, you're going to quit unless you know exactly where you are in the step-by-step planning process. Now, bear in mind that this is not going to be the final funnel system. You can always go back and forth and change it however you wish. That's why we don't really recommend a pen and paper. We recommend that you utilize a tool on your computer that allows you to drag and drop the blocks around. And that way you can move things around, because if you're dealing with pen and paper, it's going to get really messy. You're going to have to redo it. And yeah, it's cheaper. It's just going to be very chaotic. And we want the easiest way for you. So with that said, let's jump on in. Let's go to the mind mapping software and let's build out the survey funnel. Okay, so like I said, I am using a site called lucidchart.com. lucid.com. That's LUCID chart.com. This site is great and I highly recommend it if you can. It's not too expensive. There's a very small monthly fee, but I think it's about $2 to $4 max per month, and it's really worthwhile at the end of the day. So let's walk through kind of what we talked about earlier in the previous videos. But basically, first off, we need to gather data, right? So we'll just use this block as the gather data block. So we need to gather information about the prospect's different needs. So this could be a separate survey. Well, we'll do this. We'll do gather information, and this is how we're going to do it. We can either take a survey, or secondary, we can also sit down with a prospect and talk with them and get a better understanding of where they're coming from. So these are two different options. Option 1, take a survey, and option 2, sit down with a prospect. Once we've talked to several prospects and you've gathered enough data for your survey and you're ready to go, and you've compiled kind of a list of different needs like what we talked about earlier, then we can move on to the actual funnel. So by this point, we should have enough data. So this could be 3 to 5 different prospect buyers. So I think for simplicity's sake, let's just do 3. And we'll call these pathways or paths. So there are 3 different paths. So here is where we start the funnel. So we'll call this the survey funnel. And there are going to be 3 different paths. So I'll put this one here. So 1, 2, and 3. So do path 1, path 2, and path 3. And let's actually name these. So let's go back to the few videos that we discussed about security. And remember, we discussed there was the father, there was the single woman, and the elderly couple. So we're going to move this down here. This is the survey funnel. And there we go. So 1, 2, and 3. Now this is going to be the actual survey. The survey. So when people come here, this is the survey. They fill it out. And based upon these choices that the answers that they give, they are either sent to path 1, path 2, or path 3. Now from this, I'm going to delete this here just to clean it up. Let's say they go to path 1. So perhaps what we find out during the process of gathering data is that the father barely has any time. So we create a video sales letter and we minimize it down to 15 minutes or even 10 minutes. And perhaps we find the same thing for the single woman or the married woman who's really busy. But then we find during our research that we found that the elderly couple, they have more time on their hands, but at the same time, they take more convincing and they're maybe reluctant or skeptical to technology. So maybe they require, in this case, a 30-minute video sales letter to really convince them. So then we can make the offer, or maybe we make the offer here. But then we found out the fathers, maybe they do buy, but we're going to add them to an email autoresponder so that we give them valuable tips, maybe for 7 days, so day 1 through 7. And maybe we find the very similar for the women, but we find for the elderly couple, we find that they require more selling, more pre-selling. So the email autoresponder ends up being 14 days. So you can imagine here, if you sent everyone here and then sent everyone to one pathway essentially, then your conversions would drop, right? But if you send them here, you send them here, and they send them here, and they fit this very, very well, then guess what? You are going to convert them at a faster and higher rate. So at this point in time, realistically, the survey, in order to implement it, we need to use a wufoo.com form. And these are going to be conditional rules. So write that here, we'll write that here, and we'll write that here. So there will be conditional rules here, here, and here. I'm going to move this a little bit over here, just so it's a little bit easier. And I don't know if you noticed this, but as I'm moving it, it locks into place. And I like that about Lucidchart is it makes it really easy and organized. And we can name this. Click OK. Now, you don't necessarily need a video sales letter all the time. Sometimes you might do enough research that you realize they don't need a video sales letter, and you might think, okay, the elderly couple, they just want really good information first. They don't really want the video sales letter, and they like text or something. So that way you can customize it based on that. Now, like I said, in terms of implementation, wufoo.com has conditional rules, and based on the questions that they answer, you can either ask them another question that is only revealed if that they show that they are the father or the single woman or married woman or elderly couple. So that's essentially it. And what we can do here is the email autoresponder series. Obviously, the emails might go back to the video sales letter, like so. So let's break this down real quick. So the survey's here, they fill it out, the conditional rules are sent here, and based on the answers that they give, they either get answered more questions or they get sent to a video sales letter, but then after that they get added to an email list, and perhaps over here they have to fill in their email, and if they get over here, they get automatically added to the email autoresponder series over here. And then they receive an email from day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and day 7. So since there are 7 days. And the email autoresponder series will then, of course, sell and redirect them back to the video sales letter. So hopefully that makes sense. That's actually very, very simplified and not very complex. But as you're going along and you're implementing things, that way you know, okay, I'm at the conditional rules, or I'm working on the video sales letter. I'm almost done. All I need to do is get here. So in certain respects, it's a motivational factor as well to help motivate you to complete the actual funnel. Congratulations, you've reached video number 9, which is the implementation to segmentation. So this is the end of the video course, and now what we need to do is take everything that you learn up until this point, what we mapped out in the previous video, and begin to get an idea of how to set things up. We're not going to show every single detail, but we're going to show you the process of what you need to do to set things up. We'll show you the form and action, how to set that up, how to set up conditional rules so that you can direct people to different places. And we'll show you what email autoresponders to use. We won't get into super detail with that because it's super easy to set up. But as far as setting up the form, we'll show you how to do that. And that's the crucial process. There's a lot of videos out there on how to set up the email autoresponder systems. Even the businesses that are selling access to their systems have a lot of information on that. So with that said, let's jump right in and do that right now. Okay, so Wufoo.com is actually owned by SurveyMonkey.com, but we're using Wufoo here. And if you go here, you create a new forum, you should see this page. Now, by default, you can edit the forum settings, and that simply allows you to change the design, the alignment, and the forum name and all that. But if we go over to add a field, in terms of building out your survey, what you want to do is you want to stick with questions that are very easy and non-threatening in the beginning, such as what is your age, what is your name, what is your email, what is your something that is very non-threatening. Because what happens is if you put your questions in that people feel like maybe invading their privacy in the beginning, then what will happen is they will be more skeptical or even reluctant to complete your survey. But if they've already started and they completed 3 questions, the higher chance is that they will complete it if the questions are easy in the beginning, because then they'll feel like the other questions are easier, or they feel like, okay, I've already completed a few of the questions, why not complete the rest of the survey or quiz? So psychologically, that is what is going on in their minds. So let's just enter here name and then email. So with Wufoo, you just click it and it automatically shows up here. And we'll click save. Continue editing this form. And so we got the name, we got the email, we could do multiple choice. So you could even do essentially what we call camouflage questions to make it fun and interesting, such as what is your favorite color? First choice, second choice, third choice. And then you can get into the nitty-gritty, such as multiple choice. What is most important to you? We can add another one that says maybe what is your age? What is your age? So we could have 25 to 34. We could have 35 to 44 based on what we saw earlier, 45 to 55. And we can see what's most important to you. Security, home security. We could say car security. Click on save. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Based on what they enter here, we could actually bring them to a different location. So if we select the field and we scroll down, we click on add branch and logic. So it says you can redirect people. So let's go back over here. Just select this here, scroll, it says redirect people to different pages or fields based on their responses. And that's what you want, right? So going back over here, we can create a field rule and we can say if age is 25 to 35, then do what? Show, we could either show something else like another question based on what they choose. And that will allow you to customize the survey as well. So we could do that. So we could say show name or show what is your favorite color or something else. So that's for showing the field rules. We have page rules, which allow you to redirect them to a certain page. So you can create a page rule if their age is that, skip to a specific page. So you could have different pages. You could have pages just for the fathers, for the single women or the married women or the elderly couples. And on those pages, you could have an opt-in form where they fill it out, or you could send them to a page which has a video on it. And then of course we have form rules. We can create a form rule and say if the age is a certain age, you can redirect them to a website. So page rules is mainly within the form itself, but if you were to redirect them to a totally different website, you can do that here. So you could have this linking to a video sales letter, right? Or this linking to an opt-in form. Or you can have them show a message. But that's why you need to use Wufoo.com, because a lot of survey builders don't really allow this. All they do is allow you to build a form, and that's it. Now, what does this look like in practical terms? So we've gotten this far in terms of showing you how to build a form and using form rules to redirect them to a page. So if we refer back to the mind map that we talked about earlier, we had the survey form. They had 3 pathways, and one pathway was going to the video sales letter. So all you would do is link this to the video sales letter. And the video sales letter would be located on a landing page where you're using something like ClickFunnels, Leadpages, or a page builder that is hosting your video sales letter. And from there, you would redirect them from the video sales letter. Either they can buy on the video sales letter, or you direct them from there to an opt-in form. You see what I'm saying? So you're really using just the form builder, Wufoo.com, to essentially redirect them to the 3 pathways. And from those 3 pathways, you would utilize web applications such as ClickFunnels, Leadpages, and other page builders, which will allow you to host a video sales letter and the email autoresponder series and get them on your list. And then you'll need to integrate with email autoresponder systems such as GetResponse.com or ActiveCampaign.com. Another one is Ontraport.com, which is good. We've got Aweber.com and others. So like I said, you're using this to redirect people over to Leadpages or ClickFunnels, which then you can grab their email, add them to your email list, and then after that, you show them the video sales letter. And then of course, based on the autoresponder, you can email them throughout 1 day to 7 days or 1 day to 14 days, depending on what you've mapped out. And that's how you implement everything. In this way, you've essentially segmented different people dependent on their different needs.